all the poems compare to Exposure. Warning, you must still understand all of the poems. There will be a poem in front of you that you must use on Wednesday, except maybe Tissue, but Exposure can be your failsafe. And if Exposure is the named poem, then fantastic. This has still been excellent revision. This will be excellent revision no matter what, because I'm going to show you a comparison paragraph for every single poem in the anthology. Tell me how, I hear William Defoe and all of you cry. The first category is Exposure to the Elements, Ozymandias and Storm on the Island. The second category is Nature's Power, the Prelude, Kamikaze, and interestingly, Tissue. The Reality of Conflict is the biggest category. Charge of the Light Brigade, Bayonet Charge, Remains, London, Poppies, War Photographer, the Emigree. The Power of Propaganda and Ideology, Checking Out My History, and My Last Duchess. This is a great way to revise the poems anyway, to put them in these categories. So let's go. In both Ozymandias and Exposure, the poets demonstrate the power of nature through exposure to the elements. So there's lots and lots of paragraphs in this video. At any point you can pause the video and think about the ideas I put forward in the paragraph. Think about these as introductions. Please don't try to memorize them. Think about what I'm doing. Think about how I'm comparing the poems. Think about the ideas I'm putting forward. Similarly, in Storm on the Island, there's no natural shelter. And the soldiers cannot shelter from the snow and exposure either. So both Storm on the Island and Ozymandias deal with the fact that you cannot shelter from the elements. Nature's power is shown in the Prelude with a huge peak that rears up on the horizon, including this in your ideas. Exposure has the melancholy army that builds up on the horizon too at dawn. In Kamikaze, it's a different kind of power from nature, because power in Kamikaze is the one that tempts him back home, that makes him give up his mission. And in Exposure as well, in a way, it kind of messes with their mental health or messes with their perception because of the way they go from snow dazed to sun dozed. In Tissue, I thought, actually, reading it back, there is a kind of power to nature because the sun shines through borders of maps, suggesting a more hopeful future, and also an idea that the sun is almost obliterating or removing those borders. There's the reality of conflict in Charge of the Light Brigade. It's exposing the commanders, perhaps. That's the part that is exposing, that they had blundered. Bayonet Charge and Exposure are very, very similar in their perspectives on the reality of conflict. Though, of course, Owen was a soldier and Hughes wasn't. It's about a lack of honour, a lack of dignity, a lack of glory, it just being a horrible experience. An awful reality in terms of the soldier killing a man, and Owen, the awful reality of you're not dying in a glorious battle, you're dying from the weather. A reminder, you can pause these videos at any point and think about the ideas, read through the paragraphs. I'm just giving you a whistle-stop tour of all the ways Exposure can compare to all of the poems. In London, you have the horrible realization that the palace just sends soldiers off to die, and their blood, there's so many soldiers dying that the blood metaphorically runs down palace walls. And again, it's the idea of it's not glorious, it's not beautiful, it's not amazing, it's just terrible death, just as it happens in Exposure. Meaningless death. In Poppies, it's the effect of conflict on other people. So the mother is grieving her son. And also you can talk about a kind of lack of grief in Exposure because they've been dehumanized because of all of the death that's happened. So going off my paragraph slightly here, now that I've had another idea, which is that there's a kind of grief and a lack of grief. There's grief in Poppies and there's a lack of grief in Exposure. But that's all to do with how war affects people differently. War Photographer is haunted. Again, it's about grief in a sense. He's haunted about the pictures that he's taken, the half-formed ghost. Are they haunted in Exposure or are they dehumanized? Again, going back to all their eyes are ice. Such a fantastic quotation. It's genuinely one of my favorite quotations for how powerful it is. All their eyes are ice, no feeling whatsoever. Being disconnected from home, feeling like you're not part of anywhere anymore. Soldiers, veterans often talk about how they don't feel connected to anyone anymore because no one will understand the effect of being in a conflict. And I've talked about ghosts drag home in Exposure. And then in Emigree, if she ever returns to her homeland, she won't feel connected to that either. So she'll feel dark in their free city, not right, not fitting in anymore. And then checking out my history is about the power of propaganda. So Owen feels like the soldiers were tricked. They were tricked by this propaganda. And he's trying to expose this propaganda, trying to expose that it's a lie. For God's invincible spring, our love is made afraid. Agard also shows the power of propaganda, as he's made to feel restricted and perhaps afraid by the narrow version of history he is taught. Bandaged up my eye with my own history. This was the trickiest one, My Last Duchess in Exposure, but again it demonstrates that every single poem can compare technically to every other poem. In My Last Duchess, the Duke constructs his own propaganda. It's a dramatic monologue. It may not be true at all, the way he describes the Duchess, but his own propaganda, his story, is the one that we learn. So this has been Teach Smith. I sincerely hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions about the literature paper 2, please leave a comment. I will get back to you. I will try to help you.